It's interesting because of Doug's upbringing, but you guys are either a case of two righties doing the genetic dance and coming out with a leftie, which is entirely possible, or one of Felix's parents is actually a leftie who was forced into being a righty at an early age.
Yeah.
Either which is very interesting. In our household, we have two righties. Maybe we'll do a deeply unethical experiment and try and force her to be a leftie. In the name of science, we have to look at all conditions.
You're listening to the Science Baby podcast with me, Leila.
And me, Kim.
We're two nerdy mums who've researched the crap out of parenthood.
Seriously, you do not want to see our internet search histories.
Each episode, we chat about the why behind pregnancy, birth, and everything that comes after.
Because babies don't come with a manual, but with one born every minute, we reckon we can figure it out.
How are you?
Yeah, really good. We've had a good week. Although something's happening in Stella's brain, she is aggy this week. She wants to be entertained at all times, which I think is just something switching on at kind of 6-7 months. She doesn't like me leaving her. I think she now understands that we can be separate. It's a lot. It's a lot for her. She has required quite a lot of entertainment. So much so that the other day, so the cats are also being quite needy at the moment. Classic. So I managed to buy myself about 15 minutes earlier in the week because I remembered that my cat Rambo, he really likes to watch birds. So like bird TV on YouTube is excellent. And Stella, in particular, really likes to watch the cats. So I put up bird TV on YouTube in the lounge. Rambo immediately zeroed in and was interacting with it. So then Stella on my lap was very engaged just watching Rambo. And I just stared into space for 15 minutes.
That is winning at parenting. That is.
I mean, not really.
I would take it. I would take it. It doesn't get much better than that, to be fair.
Oh, God. I was like, just watch the screen. Stella wasn't technically getting screen time because she was watching the cat, but Rambo was definitely getting screen time. But I think it's less of a thing with cats. I
think it's less of a worry, mate. For sure.
I don't have the mental capacity to worry about the cat's screen time. So there's the answer. So it's fine. Everything's fine.
Picking your battles, for sure.
Yeah. And how's your week been?
I don't know, just back to normal. It's been quite lovely, actually. Doug's been back at work. I've only had one toddler to deal with. It's been great.
We love you very much.
We love you. I don't know, it's more straightforward when you've got a routine and you know that you're going to be somewhere. We do swimming lessons and it's at a private swimming pool in some very rich person's manor house. But because it was half term, they were having the car park renovated. And so we had to go and park on the lawn of this incredibly posh rich woman's house. And I was a bit nervous about, is it okay to park on the lawn? And she was just like getting in a major flap about how many people are going to park here. I was like, I don't know. I literally just want to swim with my child, please.
Also, pretty sure you're getting paid for the usage of your pool.
Gosh, it's so expensive. These swimming lessons, there are cheaper ones, but the pool's cold.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
and I've got a little bit of a little titty babby of a baby, and he doesn't like cold water, so it's so expensive to do swimming lessons. It's really important, but oh my gosh, take out a mortgage.
Oh God, 100%. I'm very lucky at the moment because my mother, so Stella's grandparents, believe very strongly in introducing a child to water and swimming at a young age, as I think we will both agree. And so they are funding her swimming lessons at the moment.
Oh, wonderful.
Which is incredibly kind because it's just so much money. I mean, I understand there's probably, qualifications and safety involved. So, there are overheads. But it is mad, isn't it?
We've got a really good council scheme where they get to do 5 or 6 lessons for free at that young age, about 5 or 6 months. But that's the cold pool, you see, and then you can carry on paying cheaper money in a cold pool. But yes, so it's so cute though when they're swimming. Oh, just like kick your little leggies. Ooh.
Yeah.
Have you got a noodle yet?
A noodle? No, we don't have a noodle. We've played with a noodle in the pool where we do lessons, but we haven't got ownership of a noodle. We're going away in a few weeks' time to visit Jake's family in South Africa. So it's going to be, at time of recording, it's pressing into winter, so it's going to be summer. So we have got a flotation ring
A flotation device.
Whatever the word for that is if you're a normal human. And so, yeah, I'm not sure how it's going to go.
That's cool. Because I think this is definitely something that we could cover, but the trends have changed and armbands are very much out.
Really?
Yes.
Out of fashion or a death trap?
I think out of safety, out of not letting them learn properly to swim. Because if your arms are always stuck up like this, then you're not going to be able to learn to swim very well. And so I suppose new swimming technologies, a sort of lightweight flotation vest. I've seen them in. The rings are quite good, although there's a death trap one where it's just like put your baby's neck in a ring. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, I have. It's awful.
It's dreadful.
We are talking about handedness this week.
We are. Handedness.
Right.
Left hand.
Well, and I can't believe we had the same gesture. That's so sad.
Are you right-handed or left-handed?
I am right-handed.
As am I. I'm right-handed.
Ha-ha!
And your husband?
Right-handed, I think.
Wow.
Right. Thank God we're not doing like a marriage immigration exam. That's probably the first thing they'd expect me to know about him. Yeah, he's right-handed. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Good. Douglas?
Douglas right-handed. He's got aggressively neat handwriting. It puts me to shame. Whenever I write any notes, I tell you what, look at these notes.
The scrawlings of a creative mind.
This is just madness, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just another. It's just like they're not. Those aren't letters. But none of that.
Yeah, but
This is Felix, by the way.
Sure, pal.
Just haven't gone completely crazy. That is the product of trying to share a studio with the child.
It looks like you've started with really good notes, like on Monday morning, and then by Friday afternoon, you're just like...
That's very kind of you. I think that's the degeneration of my mind on a Monday morning.
Yeah. I'm being far too generous, aren't I?
So the thing about Doug is he does write with his right hand. He claims he's amphibious, as I like to call it, ambidextrous. He claims he's ambidextrous, and he believes that he was actually born left-handed, but was forced to write with his right hand. He now writes instinctively with his right hand.
I know at least 2 or 3 people who claim the same thing, that they were born into either a family or a culture where left-handedness was considered sinister. And so at a young age they were forced to become right-hand dominant.
It's not a 50-50 like boys-girls, is it? Right and left-handedness.
No.
Like, naturally, there is the right-handedness is dominant in the population, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. It's about 90%.
Wow.
90. Yeah, it's like overwhelmingly a right-handed species. And that is, as far as I can tell, unique to humans. So I don't think... I mean, I'm not sure how much research has gone into the rest of the animal kingdom and handedness.
No.
But...
Famously lacking in hands, a lot of them.
Oh, yes, the dragonfly study didn't go very well.
Not too well. Right wing, left wing?
Oh, yes. Right-pawedness.
Yes.
Left-pawedness. So humans seem to be, as far as we know, the only species where we are overwhelmingly dominated by one hand or the other. And it's really interesting because that says quite a lot about the brain. So obviously the brain controls everything we do. So we have this weird wiring where the nerves coming from the right hemisphere of the brain kind of cross over and then control everything the left side of our body does, and vice versa.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It's like, mental.
We're so twisted. And I should say, when I started looking into this, I was like, I thought the right brain, left brain thing was all guff. I didn't think that there was anything in it. But it's like lateralisation, certain functions tend to be in the right side of the brain versus the left side of the brain. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. The thing that we know about the brain is that it is very asymmetrical in terms of what it does. Obviously, there are these amazing stories about people that are unknowingly born with like 90% of their brain missing or something, and the rest of it's just fluid. And then, they live a perfectly normal life, have 5 kids, go for a MRI scan, and then, the doctors just go white and they're like, you all right?
Yeah.
You don't seem to have a brain? So like the plasticity, which is what I think neuroscientists call it, of the brain is incredible. So if there is some architectural anomaly with the brain, it can sort of just work with what it's given. But a normally structured brain tends to be very asymmetrical. There is a specialisation. Your word was good, lateralisation.
Lateralisation.
Love that.
It basically chooses to put certain higher level functions So all of the kind of thinking and processing and sort of human level functioning, that's what we're talking about in terms of kind of where in the brain it happens, and that is split. So typically, what is it? So the left brain is typically concerned with...
Well, and this is a clue with why we're so right-handed, is one of the big things that in most people the left brain does is language. And in fact, this is one of the most, like, I didn't know this until we decided to do this podcast, but there's this really cool like area of study that seems to think that the reason that we humans are so right dominated is because there's this like potential evolutionary link between like physical gestures and vocalization. So the fact that like physical gestures may have been very important in language, you know, while vocal language was still evolving in humans. And so in most people, language is processed largely in the left hemisphere of the brain. So if we were kind of at the time making this link between gestures and other motor skills and language, that humans would have started to favour the left brain for the gestures because it was all being processed in, you know, with part and parcel of language. So if kind of motor skills started to be lateralised into the left side, that would make sense that we then all became mostly right-handed because of this crossover of the nerves. I mean, I don't think that has been overwhelmingly proved, but that seems to be quite a popular idea because it is so weird that such an overwhelming proportion of humans are right-handed.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I didn't know anything about that, about the language, but it does make sense.
Yeah.
We are a very expressive species in terms of the sounds that we make, the expressions that we make with our faces, but also we talk with our hands. I talk with my hands so much. My mum has a brilliant story of she was in an interview. She was talking with her hands and she somehow managed to hook her finger under the interviewer's glasses and flick them off his face.
Wow.
I'm like, I don't know how close she was. Maybe she's got some personal space issues. But yeah, we're incredibly expressive species, and that definitely is something that sets us apart.
Yeah, so it's quite suspicious that those two things seem to have happened, and it would make sense that they're linked in the brain. Have you ever seen a funny video of an Italian trying to speak while sitting on their hands?
Yes.
It's really funny. Traditionally, the most, like, gestured culture on the planet.
I saw recently encountered a really fascinating content creator who's profoundly autistic, and as an adult sort of selectively non-verbal, and he was able to recognise when his body was telling him to be non-verbal, basically. But when he did speak, he was doing this gorgeous dance with his hands, because I think he was helping him bring the words out. I was watching him thinking, is this sign language? But it wasn't. It was this beautiful kind of gesturing. And, you know, I don't know enough about autism in general, but he was implying that, you know, this is a way that helps him sort of process what's coming out of his mouth.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I've come across quite a few papers in the research for this episode that talk about, okay, cool, well, if kind of the norm is a right-handed person who processes language and gesturing in the left side of their brain, what's going on with lefties? Because 10% is still a lot of people who are left-handed. So there's quite a lot of study on, okay, cool, what's different about the brains of lefties?
I'd be fascinated to know what's going on inside the brains of lefties, because I'm not a lefty, but Felix is.
Wow!
Yeah.
Cool!
And I'm like, you are a magical little unknown creature. Like, how is your brain? I mean, constantly I'm asking myself, what is going on inside your brain?
Yes.
But yeah, so Felix started to show a preference for a hand probably around 6 months. And I started to look into it and think, you know, is this normal? When are they supposed to get a hand preference? And as far as I know, that was relatively normal, that he's starting to kind of experiment with what hand feels natural. But it came as a surprise to me. He started to go for things with his left hand because, as I said, I'm right-handed. Doug is an unknown creature. So I was thinking, is it a genetic thing? Is it like right trumps left and then you skip a generation genetically? But it turns out it's way more complicated than that. It's not one gene that controls whether you're right or left-handed. They've looked into it and it's probably about 40 genes are involved in it, which is insane.
Wow.
That ties into what you were saying about it being tied into a whole lot more brain processing instead of the lateralisation of the brain, because, you know, if it's to do with the whole brain, then it's not just like choose one hand, is it? It's tied up with a whole load of other cognitive and motor processes.
Yeah, it's not just like, oh, one bit of the brain does language, and then next to it is the bit that does your handedness. And there seems to be stuff on both the left and right side that work together, and, you know, the relationship goes both ways, and so it's utterly impossible to unpick for a researcher, basically. And I've seen some research that kind of goes into, you know, in left brain people, there is potentially more symmetry, or more to the point, there's less asymmetry than you would expect. Some people apparently actually have their language processing centres on the other side, which could contribute or be related to a reverse of handedness. And apparently, like, some or potentially just one of the genes is to do with which side your organs go on. So there might be some whole kind of like really early laying out of the body process that's going on that cascades down and creates a left-handed baby. Mental. Anyway, very complicated.
That's not to say that every left-hander has their liver on the wrong side.
No. But yeah, as you say, there's like load of genes, and you only need to have one gene to create a complicated enough picture, let alone, you know, 40.
All playing into one another, for sure.
That is so interesting that Felix has turned out to be a leftie.
Which is, you know, I would have thought that Doug's story about being a leftie when he was a child would have been made up, except for the fact that Felix is quite certainly left-handed.
And something I hadn't thought to look into is whether you can use that kind of simple diagram to figure out, well, if one of us is a leftie and one of us is a righty, what's the percentage chance of our child
But
being
I think
a
if
leftie?
with 40 different genes involved, it's almost impossible to track that. You know, I suppose if you have got left-handers in the family, you know that you've got a cluster of left-handedness genes kind of making their way through. But it's like tossing 40 coins, essentially.
Yeah, and it is, well, it's interesting because of Doug's upbringing, but you guys are either a case of two righties doing the genetic dance and coming out with a leftie, which is entirely possible, or one of Felix's parents is actually a leftie who was forced into being a righty at an early age.
Yeah.
Either which is very interesting. In our household, we have two righties.
Do you have any lefties further up the chain?
No, not that I know of.
No, same.
Maybe we'll do a deeply unethical experiment and try and force her to be a leftie. In the name of science, we have to look at all conditions.
So yeah, because Felix started to show it around 6 months, I was wondering, is Stella starting to give you any hints? Does she favour a hand?
Yes, she, at quite a young age, so maybe around 4-ish months, I noticed she was displaying a preference for reaching for things with her left hand, which is what, in the same way as you prompted me to look into this, and I was like, oh God, you know, she's not supposed to be showing this preference for years. So I was really surprised to see a preference, and I looked into when kids are expected to show a preference, and it's really not yet, is it? Although, you know, maybe that's, I mean, it's really difficult because the older studies say a few years, but actually there is some evidence that there can be a preference in some babies, as you say, as early as 6-ish months. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, a lot of anecdotal stuff that I've heard from people I've spoken to is that they're not sort of only going for one stuff with one hand early on, but they will start to show a preference. And I wonder if that's a kind of a consequence of us as parents being a little bit more present and watchful of our children than necessarily parents were in the past. And that, you know, that's not to say that our parents' generation were completely neglectful, but I do think that with online communities and comparison and just the way that society is structured these days, parents tend to be a lot more kind of honed in, target locked on child, watching them all the time. Certainly people like us who are massive nerds. And so these things are kind of getting spotted and noted and maybe written down and shared more widely earlier on. So it'd be interesting to see, you know, if that is still the case.
That's very interesting, because one thing that a lot of the more modern researchers are upfront about is the fact that a lot of the studies that had been done, sort of since the 80s or, around that time, firstly, sample size, always an issue. That, we just haven't managed to get sample sizes big enough to create robust conclusions. But also the problem is that you tend to take data, you make a measurement with a kid at, say a certain interval, maybe every 3 months, or maybe just once, and then you just note down their age, and that's a data point. If you're not taking data very often from a single person, you're not going to capture how much that person is changing over time. And the problem is with handedness and with language acquisition, or any skill that you're learning, is individual variation, which is another way of saying that all babies develop at their own pace. Individual variation is so overwhelming that it often completely swamps any results for these studies if you're not capturing that kind of granular detail of each person. So one thing we really needed was more longitudinal methodology to these studies.
Which basically means continuous following individuals, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you still need to control for this individual variation, but at least you're capturing that data and not missing it completely in your results. And so what you're describing is, it's anecdotal, it's a parent watching their child, but it is by definition a longitudinal study, isn't it? You're watching your child constantly.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's a factor. Maybe it is correct that they're showing handedness a bit earlier. We're just noticing it more.
Maybe so. Or maybe we're just lying to ourselves, gaslighting ourselves into believing what we want to believe.
Absolutely. And what I noticed as well, because the jury's still out with Stella, and it will be for years, I assume. But what I noticed in the research for this podcast is, so I'm right-handed. I'm facing her. I am offering her a toy with my right hand, which is on the left side of her body. So she's reaching with her left side. So she's noticing, it's slightly on that, yeah. And so I wonder if I was biasing her handedness unintentionally in those earlier weeks, because I've started to stop doing that now. And so now she's feeding, I kind of alternate which hand I give her food with. And she doesn't seem to show a preference anymore. So it may just be her brain kind of testing stuff and going on the right and going on the left, or it may be that I've stopped biasing her.
Interesting. I'd be really interested to hear how that develops. Check in again in a year's time and see how that's changed.
Yeah.
Because I should say that, you're not going to make your child right or left-handed by doing that long term. It is pretty certainly going to be a genetic thing, something inbuilt within their own bodies, within their own brain wiring. It's not one of these environmental factors where, if you're always, offered something to your left side, you're going to become left-handed. But maybe like you say, in these early months, it's this kind of a natural response to the environment that's around her before a preference has cemented itself.
Yeah, but I guess maybe in Doug's case, there may be a degree of plasticity about it, within a certain time window, because there are kids who show an early natural preference for the left side, but are taught to become right-hand dominant. Does Doug know why this happened? Was it a cultural thing?
Yeah, he was told that he had to write with his right hand because that's what he had to do, because he was the product of demons. Not really.
Well, yes, but not for the reasons we're discussing today.
No, I think it's a widespread cultural thing. In other languages, the word for left is sinister. It has negative associations and has done, for as long as these languages have developed. So it might just be, the other, the minority, our fantastic ability as humans to sideline minorities and tell them that they're wrong and they need to conform to the majority, which is great.
We'll find anything to create an other, won't we?
Yeah. So he was told, I think, by his grandparents that, he needed to conform, essentially, and learn to write with his right hand. And I think that's, I believe that's why his handwriting is so neat, because it's a conscious effort. Whereas I have no hand preference. I apparently cannot write.
At least you know what it means.
Sometimes.
And so is there a... Because the majority of us are right-handed as mothers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm just kind of thinking about, you know, the fact that I was unintentionally biasing Stella by passing her stuff with my right hand.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean that we're sort of creating a biased environment for our babies from the beginning?
Potentially so. I mean, there is an absolutely staggering statistic that I learned, which was 90% of mothers cradle their child, their baby, on their left-hand side. Do you hold Stella instinctively on your left-hand side or your right-hand side?
I have no idea. Further research is needed. I will report back.
Okay. Do you hold your child?
Oh, yes, I do. I would like to assure you that I respond to my child.
Okay, so when you hold your child, where is her head?
So this is really interesting because when I'm rocking her, so if she's on her back, now I will have her head on my right side, but that has changed. So I noticed as a smaller baby, it was on my left. And the only reason it's changed is because I've got a pretty bad back at the moment.
That's fair.
Funnily enough.
That's fair.
So I've noticed that I've switched sides because there's some kind of imbalance in my hips and my back, which means that it's more comfortable now she's heavier to have her on my right, but as a newborn she was always on my left.
On your left hand side. Yeah, so that's in line with the vast majority of mothers who choose to hold their baby on their left hand side, basically head in the left elbow crease. And I was like that all the time. Like it felt so strange for me to be able to hold him on that side. And even now, like if I lift him, I prop him on my left hip, I don't think I would have the strength now to hold him on my right hip. But that's only born of, 2.5 years of having him on my left-hand side. So, if you see me in public and I've got this great hulking gorilla left arm, I have my toddler to blame for that.
She's got these massive lats on one side.
But that is incredibly common, and it would be tempting to think that is because, as mothers, we have to hold our babies and we probably also have to do other things. And 90% of people are right-handed, so 90% of people are holding their baby on the left-hand side and using their right hand, their dominant hand, to do other things. Feed themselves, fold laundry, accept gifts of food and drink from loving partners. But actually, it's fascinating because when you drill into the statistics, it's the 90% is spread across people who are both right and left-handed.
Oh!
Doesn't matter whether you're right or left-handed, there's still a 9 in 10 chance that you will be holding your baby on the left-hand side.
Wow!
So it's probably not to do... So that particular behaviour is probably not to do with dominant hand. And another reason that we think that is because we see this kind of one-sided preference in mothers and infants of other species, including the great apes, gorillas, chimpanzees, but also other mammals, things like horses, reindeer, kangaroos, walruses, sheep.
Of course.
Even like aquatic mammals like orcas and beluga whales, they will preferentially keep their infants on one side of their body. They don't have hands to be dominant or otherwise, but they will tend to preferentially keep their infants on one side of the body.
Whoa.
So what they think it is, once again, it's a brain thing. And it's interesting how you were saying that our right-handedness is linked to our left side of the brain, which is to do with language. They think that this preference to keeping your infant on the left side is to do with what the right side of the brain does, because of that cross-wiring. They think it's to keep the child in the left eye. So when you hold your baby on the left-hand side, it's the left eyes that are connecting. Just try that with your eyeballs, yeah.
Eyeballs.
It's kind of a left side vision thing. I love that you've actually got to place a thing there. But essentially, in your visual field, more of your left-hand side visual field is engaged because it's right there. And the right side of the brain is associated with emotion, memory, attention, and facial recognition. It's all the kind of squishy interpersonal relationship side of things. And so what they think is that for mammals that have developed this preference for keeping their child on one side, it's helping to cement that bond with their baby and basically making it easy for mother to keep an eye on their baby, but keep that sensitive, that empathic, connected eye on their baby. So they might be able to recognise changes in their faces, or, you know, their health or their happiness, their emotions. The right side of the brain is much more capable of doing that, and in order to do that, they're going to be engaging the left visual field.
That's madness, isn't it?
Yeah, so crazy.
That's so cool. But it just goes to show how our brain is so highly specialised and honed by evolution for different parts of the brain to be undergoing different specialisations is madness.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show that there's even a signal that the left visual field makes that processing more efficient.
It's mad. It's absolutely mad. And in animals with the eyes on the sides of their heads, it's even more of a pronounced thing, because obviously the left and right visual fields don't cross over. So there's an even more intense lateralisation. For pigeons, the right-hand side of the brain doesn't know what the left-hand side of the brain is doing. Because the visual fields don't connect. Like, the information from the visual fields don't connect. But anyway, fun fact.
That is an incredibly fun fact.
Yes, fun bird fact.
So is each hemisphere of the brain processing each visual field independently?
Yeah. And I think they tested it by, showing one side of a pigeon something and then unblindfolded the other side of the pigeon. They had no idea it was there.
Wow. That's cool. That's very cool. Amazing. It begs the question, what is going on in your infant or toddler's brain as this handedness is kind of crystallising over months or years?
Yeah.
I mean, this is an absolute rabbit hole that we could disappear down, but there were quite a few studies done on this, starting like decades and decades ago. But there seems to be a consistent finding that as an infant is developing, the process of language acquisition seems to be correlated with development in what they're doing with their hands, which includes, a preference for one hand over the other, or just kind of the skills in manipulating objects and just doing stuff with their hands. It is wild to me that you can kind of coincide these developmental leaps in time with each other, which kind of shows that there is some simultaneous development and processing going on in these parts of the brains. So like there's one thing that I found incredibly surprising was that you can sort of map, when a child is able to kind of arrange objects and put them down in the right place and store them for later, with, how their vocabulary develops, for example. And it all seems to be, the hypothesis at the time was, well, the ability to kind of arrange objects in space in front of you and store them in the right places is a reflection on how that child is able to represent that object within their head, which is kind of the same as learning language, right? You're representing ideas in your head and figuring out how to, interact with the world by putting those ideas back out into the world, or indeed by, rearranging the shapes in front of you. So it all seems to be kind of the theory of mind around these two sets of skills, motor skills and language skills, feels like there's quite a lot of overlap. So they seem to develop at the same time. And indeed, sort of the more longitudinal studies that have been done much more recently that do kind of capture how children develop over time have seen some evidence that children who develop right-handedness consistently from an earlier age, which is to say they've taken enough data from them over time that they can be sure that they haven't just kind of been swapping left, right, left, right, left, right over the months or years and then just become right-handed at the very last minute. They're consistently preferring to use their right hand. By the time they get to toddlerhood, so around 2 years, there is a signal already that their language skills are superior to those who haven't specialised as right-handedness children. So that's not to say that you're going to be left behind if you are not right-handed by the age of 6 months. All of the kind of language skills are completely normal and kind of, even out by the time you're older. But there seems to be a slight trend that the timing of some language skills is shifted slightly earlier as children are becoming right-handed a little bit earlier. And it's just an absolute minefield because there's not enough left-handed children in the world to study.
Well, this is what I was going to say. How much of this is determined by the fact that, we don't actually have the same proportion of left-handers to study? And if we did sample the same proportion, then it would be taking and misrepresenting the overall population as well. So, it's a really difficult thing to study. I mean, once again, anecdotally, our experience has been totally opposite to that, because Felix started to show a preference pretty early on for his left hand. But the other thing that Felix did is start talking incredibly early, and his language is incredibly advanced. It terrifies me sometimes, the complexity of the sentiments that he can express. As a 2.5-year-old, he's like, "Mummy, that's the wrong word." And he will just say that to me. And I was like, oh gosh, wow. Like, he literally said that to me this morning. So he's got very advanced language, so much so that nursery have commented on his ability to properly use swear words. Embarrassing.
He's his mother's son.
Is his mother's son. Honestly, I don't even recognise myself anymore. I barely swear. Barely ever swear. But according to that study, that's not the trend that we would expect. We'd expect his early preference for left-handed to mean that he was not linguistically advanced, but that's not the case that we found at all. So
and I think this begs the question: how are we evaluating language skills? Because there are well-established tools to evaluate language skills in infants and toddlers, which researchers will be very familiar with. I guess the question is, are those tests unintentionally biased towards right-handers because they haven't been tested on left-handers? So in the same way as the profoundly autistic content creator that you've been following is very open about the fact that they find it useful to process language in a way that might not look the same way as we'd expect. Maybe left-handed people process language in a slightly different way to right-handed people. And so are these tests actually a valid test of language skills in left-handed people? Dunno.
Yeah, dunno. Oh, if only we were academics.
Oh God, look at us on our armchairs teaching them how to do their jobs.
No, it's interesting because posing these kinds of hypotheses is really interesting, but actually getting at the nuts and bolts of how you find those answers is really tricky. I'd love to dive into that in a future episode of like why it is so difficult to research anything to do with babies and parents. Why baby research is so shit, basically.
Yeah, exactly. There is a body of evidence that shows that language skills develop in a certain way that seems to be linked with handedness and in particular right-handed preference from an early age, but that seems to be just a small snapshot of what is going on in a typical brain that is wired up to be right-handed and how timings can coincide with each other. That seems to be all these studies are able to say. And they're very upfront about that. But it's really interesting, I think, to explore the complexities of what creates left-handedness and what that might tell us about how skills develop at a young age for these people, for people like Felix.
Yeah, it'd be fascinating. Now that Felix's hand preference, I believe, is really kind of crystallised and he is overwhelmingly favouring his left hand, it's been interesting as two functional righties trying to nurture and parent a left-hander. It surprises me all the time how different things are. So when he does football and when he does rugby, he kicks with his left foot. And that apparently is remarkable to coaches, So I am quite excited about that, to see where that might lead him in a future sporting career. But also in things like, especially eating, it takes me by surprise all the time. So he's using utensils now, and I will, sometimes I might load up a fork or a spoon if it's a particularly difficult food like a spaghetti or pasta or something. I'll help him by stabbing his pastas or winding his spaghetti. But I have to kind of consciously offer the fork into the correct hand for him, the left hand, because naturally we are ingrained as a right-handed family prior to Felix's arrival into handing things to the expected hand, which is the right hand. So I'll lay out a breadstick platter for him, for example, and then I'm like, oh no, I'd put the breadsticks on his right hand side. No, they have to be on the left hand side so we can pick them up with his left hand and dip them into his cream cheese or whatever.
Oh wow!
Now that you're weaning with Stella, I think that is a great opportunity to kind of test her preference. If you put things for her to grab in the centre of her plate, what is she going for? Obviously, cutlery is a difficult one because we have to put it on one side or the other, but you could make a conscious effort to kind of switch that around as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I sort of got to a place where we offer things to both sides equally, but we haven't got to a point yet where we've put stuff down in a central neutral territory, a demilitarised zone,
if you like, yes.
and seen what she naturally goes with.
Yeah, if you do baby-led weaning, where she's, grabbing her own batons of anything, I think that's a really good test for preference at that early stage.
Cool. We'll have to do a follow-up episode.
Yes, please. Yeah. So yeah, eating is a big one, and it's something even now I'm still kind of checking myself. I'm like, no, you've done that wrong. That's not going to be helpful for him. When we sit at the table, he sits at the head of the table, obviously, most important person in the household, and then me and his dad sit on the either side. And it just so happens that I'm the one that's situated on his left-hand side, so I'm always the one that's managing the food input now. But yeah, I think these are pitfalls that we're going to keep on coming up against because we live in a world that is overwhelmingly designed for right-handers. Felix has got into the guitar recently. It does sound like he's this ridiculous prodigy, but at the moment we're just kind of scattergunning activities and seeing what sticks. But he's got a little guitar, like a little child-sized guitar. He loves it. But we realised that it's, how do we string it? Guitars are expected to be held in a particular way, and so they're typically strung in a particular way. But if he's going to be a left-hander, how are we going to teach him to hold this guitar? And how are we going to teach him to interact with the strings, whether they'll be high at the top or the bottom?
That's a good point. Yeah, do you have to string it up opposite?
It is an option. So some guitarists string it opposite so that it can be held on the opposite side, but other guitarists, to my understanding, play their guitar upside down.
Wow.
And they learn to play it upside down.
That's very cool.
Yeah. So who knows? Who knows? And obviously scissors as well. He's getting into scissors at the moment. Great. Mummy, I've got scissors. No. But scissors are one of the famously difficult things for left-handers to manage. And writing as well. So I'm trying to teach a proper pen grip at the moment because he holds it like a knife. So trying to teach him that pinching pen grip, but because he learns by copying, like he's a mimic, he wants to see how it's done by somebody else. I'm now having to choose to hold a pen in my left hand so he can properly copy the grip in my left hand and see where the fingers go. Because if I do it with my right hand, he hasn't got a clue. He's trying to get his thumb round the wrong way with his left hand. It's such a minefield.
And also, one of the best examples of left-handed handicap in today's world, or this society, is that we write left to right, and so we constantly smudge our handwriting as we're going across with our left hand.
Yeah.
How's he managing that, or is he not there yet?
He's not at full sentences. He's not filling a page just yet. No, there's not a lot of controlled pen work, to be fair.
But I wonder if there probably are specialist smudge-free ink pens, maybe?
Oh, I'm certain there are. So much opportunity for spending extra money on your minority disadvantage, yeah.
Absolutely. A friend of mine, her son is left-handed, and she was warning us that everything is just that little bit more expensive when you're buying the left-handed version of it.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, yet another way capitalism gets us!
That's it for this week's episode of the Science Baby podcast.
When did your little one start showing signs of a hand preference?
Join the chat on Instagram or find this and every podcast episode at thesciencebaby.com.
See you next time!